Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a really interesting source one of you sent over. It's a transcript from a YouTube video. Think of this as our way of, pulling out the key bits from what people are discussing about Donald Trump lately, based just on this material. Our mission really is to understand the main stories, the claims being made, and, well, what it all might mean, according to this source.
Exactly.
It covers quite a bit: social media, polls, international stuff, domestic issues, too. Things move so fast these days, right? So we're hoping this gives you some clarity, some context without being, too much.
Yeah, looking closely at one source like this can be pretty insightful. You start to see what specific events get highlighted, the angle they take, how they connect different issues. So yeah, look into it, see what themes pop out.
Okay, sounds good. So the video apparently kicks off with Trump's social media, some late night activity. We're talking posts aimed at ABC News, specifically about their reporting on Qatar. The transcript mentions threats of lawsuits and the specific claim about Qatar supposedly giving him a free Boeing 747.
Yeah, I saw that part in the notes. He apparently said ABC was told, Qatar is not giving me a free Boeing 747 airplane because they are not instead donating the plan to the United States Air Force.
Right, so a specific kind of denial.
Definitely. It suggests maybe a sensitivity about how these deals look, you know?
And it also mentions accusations against Hillary Clinton, something about weird conspiracy videos.
Yeah, that gets a mention too. Seems like a continuation of focusing on past rivals and maybe some less substantiated stuff that circulates online.
Okay. Then the source shifts focus to Walmart.
Does. The transcript quotes Trump saying Walmart is making too much money and that they got to eat the tariffs. China.
Right, and then the video apparently contrasts this by bringing in a quote from Jonah Goldberg. Something like, "I'm old enough to remember when Trump said tariffs were paid by other countries."
Yeah, that juxtaposition is clearly intentional in the source material.
It definitely highlights that question. Who actually pays for these tariffs?
That's a core economic debate, isn't it? If Walmart eats the tariff, well, that cost has to go somewhere. Either prices go up for you, the consumer, or Walmart makes less profit.
Which is different from saying the exporting country, like China, pays it all.
Exactly. So the source is flagging that apparent inconsistency or shift in explaining tariff impacts. It raises questions about the real economic effects.
Okay. The social media part also mentioned posts about James Comey.
And his family members who apparently work at the FBI.
The quote was something like, "They need to be relieved of their duties."
Yeah, that's what the transcript says, which, raises potential questions about political pressure on government agencies.
And then, almost randomly, it mentions fake AI videos of Trump singing.
Yeah, that was in there too. Bit of a strange mix.
It is, but maybe it touches on that whole issue of, what's real and what's fake online now.
Good point. Even if it's just a singing video, it points to that larger challenge of deepfakes in AI content.
Okay, so moving on from social media, the video gets into polling data.
It does. Specifically from a Strength in Numbers Verasite poll, according to the transcript. And the main takeaway reported is that Trump's approval is underwater in basically every major category.
Underwater. Okay, what kind of numbers are we talking about?
Well, the source lists net negative ratings, like -32 on prices and inflation.
Wow, okay.
-17 on jobs and the economy, -21 on trade, -20 on government funding.
So quite negative across the board.
Yeah, and also -7 on healthcare, -16 on foreign policy, and -16 on the federal government workforce.
What strikes me there, or what the source seems to emphasize, is that things like the economy and trade, aren't those usually seen as Republican strong points?
Traditionally, yes. So seeing negative numbers there could suggest a few things, according to how you interpret polls. Maybe it's, general public dissatisfaction with how things are going in those areas. Inflation is a big one, obviously.
Right.
Or it could just be part of maybe a broader negative trend in approval spilling over into those areas.
It's just one poll, of course, but those numbers, as presented in the source, certainly paint a challenging picture.
Definitely a snapshot suggesting public opinion headwinds on those fronts, at least at the time of that poll.
Okay, then the source pivots to international relations, starts with Iran.
Yeah, it quotes Ayatollah Khamenei, apparently responding to remarks Trump made during a Middle East trip. Khamenei reportedly called the remarks so low they were a source of shame for the American nation.
Strong words.
Very strong.
Yeah.
And the commentator in the video, they apparently build on that, calling the whole trip utterly disastrous,
Okay.
and saying it just reinforced negative views of Trump around the world. So the source suggests significant diplomatic damage.
And it gets more specific too, right? There were allegations about interactions that the source claims are underreported.
Yes, exactly. One involved the leader of Syria.
What was the claim there?
The source alleges there was an offer of a Trump Tower Damascus.
Wow.
Yeah, supposedly as an incentive to get sanctions removed.
Yeah.
And then the source claims Trump complimented the leader's appearance and tariffs against Syria were then removed.
If that's accurate. I mean, that sounds like mixing business and foreign policy pretty directly.
It certainly raises those kinds of questions, yeah. About potential conflicts of interest, how foreign policy gets made. The force definitely presents it as something needing more scrutiny.
Okay, and there was another alleged deal mentioned involving crypto.
This one reportedly involved the Trump family claiming they were 60% owners of something called World Liberty Life, or a name like that.
And this was with Pakistan.
With Pakistan, yeah. Apparently in late April, which the source notes was shortly after a terrorist attack in Kashmir.
And the source says this angered India.
That's the claim, that India was infuriated. And also that Prime Minister Modi was frustrated with Trump claiming he negotiated a ceasefire between India and Pakistan.
Which India apparently denies.
According to the source, yes, India reportedly denies any such negotiation happened recently.
And denies recent trade deals, too.
Also yeah. The source says India pushed back on claims Trump apparently made about new trade deals.
So the picture painted by the source is one of pretty tangled and maybe contradictory relations in South Asia.
It definitely highlights potential friction. The timing of the alleged crypto deal, the disputed claims about ceasefires and trade. It suggests, well, communication breakdowns or maybe just very different public portrayals of what's happening. Geopolitics there is always complex, of course.
Okay, let's shift back to the U.S. economy. The source brought up something called reverse Yankee deals.
Right. The point being made was that American companies are apparently borrowing more money in Europe.
Why would they do that?
Well, the source cites Bank of America data, saying it's because costs are lower in Europe and there's uncertainty around U.S. tariffs.
Makes sense. Cheaper money is always attractive.
Exactly. And predictability helps, too. If U.S. trade policy seems uncertain, maybe Europe looks more stable for financing.
How much money are we talking about?
The figure mentioned from Bank of America was 40 billion euros borrowed by, I think, May 9th, with the source saying more deals happen after that.
Okay, that's a significant amount.
It is. And the commentator in the video uses this to argue that Trump has, quote, destroyed the American brand of stability.
That's a strong claim, linking borrowing trends to a loss of confidence in the U.S. economic climate.
It's definitely a critical perspective presented in the source, yeah.
And sticking with the economy, the source also mentioned a credit downgrade.
Yeah, Moody's reportedly downgrading the U.S. credit score.
Which is a big deal, right?
Huge deal. The source highlights it as the first downgrade since, what, 1917?
Wow.
And the commentator, again, directly links this reported downgrade to Trump's behavior.
So connecting policy and perhaps leadership style directly to something as fundamental as the nation's credit rating.
That's the connection being drawn in the source material, yes. A sovereign downgrade can affect borrowing costs for the government, investor confidence. It has ripple effects.
Okay. Then there was a mention of oversight issues, specifically about Air Force One.
Right. This part featured comments from Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin.
What was his point?
He was apparently questioning the potential purchase of a new Air Force One, suggesting it wasn't really about need because there's an existing plane.
So more about personal preference.
That's what Raskin seems to imply, framing it as potentially a $400 million gift driven by Trump's preference for a specific plane.
And he called it a constitutional test. What's the test there?
Well, it likely boils down to Congress's power of the purse, separation of powers. If a huge spending item like that is seen as driven by personal desire rather than like a formally assessed government need.
It challenges Congress's role in controlling spending.
Exactly. Raskin seems to be framing it as a test of whether Congress will assert its authority to make sure public money is spent appropriately for national interest, not personal convenience.
Got it. Okay, and then finally, the source briefly touched on a few other things.
Yeah, kind of quick roundup at the end. It mentioned terrible storms, Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois, with, sadly, over 16 reported deaths.
And there was criticism mentioned?
Yes, the source notes criticism that Trump hadn't addressed the storms, and it also included a claim that storm forecasting might have been hampered.
How so?
Due to alleged staff reductions or firings at NOAA and the National Weather Service. The implication being warnings might have been less effective.
Hmm. Okay, what else?
Mentions of radar problems at airports Denver and Newark were named. Others may be expected.
And a measles outbreak.
Yeah, measles at Newark Airport. And the source apparently threw in a quick reference to RFK Jr.'s views on vaccination in that context.
So quite a mixed bag of domestic issues at the end there. Storm response, infrastructure, public health.
Definitely. It covers a lot. Disaster response, potential issues with government agency effectiveness, infrastructure worries with the radar, and public health concerns.
So if we step back and look at everything this one source covered, what are the main threads?
Well, pulling it together, you see a clear focus in this source on controversial social media use.
Right.
Then there's the reporting of negative polling data, even in traditionally strong areas for Republicans. A lot on international relations showing strained ties, alleged controversial deals, conflicting accounts.
Yeah, that was a big part.
Concerns about the economy, like the borrowing shifts and the credit downgrade linked back to stability and leadership.
And finally, those questions about governance and oversight, like the Air Force One example.
Exactly. Those seem to be the core themes highlighted in this particular transcript we dove into.
And it's crucial, like you said earlier, to remember this is all drawn from the perspective and the information presented in this specific YouTube video transcript.
Absolutely. It's one window into the conversation, offering a specific viewpoint on these events.
Right. Which brings us to a final thought for you, our listener. Considering this whole range of issues the source brought up from, those alleged international dealings to the economy, the polls, domestic problems, what single area, based on what we discussed from this source, do you think holds the most significant potential long-term consequences? And why? Something to think about. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring these topics, look at different sources, and form your own perspectives. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.